Now, so far we have seen data structures to have multiple elements, one after the other. But what if you actually want to associate different elements? Let's say, for example, you want to associate a person's name with their date of birth. So, for example, you would have John associated with his date of birth of the 10th of January 1997, or Mary associated with her date of birth of the 4th of July 2000. How would you do that when you have something like an array or linked list? You could also have like all these elements one after the other in a linked list and just have the two like concatenated together. But it's not very practical in order to just like look up one person and have their date of birth immediately. So to associate two elements, we would typically use what's called the hash map. Now the hash map is also the dictionary you have in Python, but let's have a look at how it works behind the scenes. So the idea of a hash map is very simple. You only need to have like an array, an actual array, like we've seen in the first video on the data structure. So you have an array which is of a defined size at the beginning, depends on the implementation. So let's say it has a length of n and it starts at 0. And I have a bunch of boxes here. And all these boxes are going to contain a pointer to something. And we're going to detail that a bit later. But first, in order to have an index for this array from a string or any other object, we first need to take this object and transform it into an integer that we can use as an index. So in your exercises, you have a function which is called a hash function. And this hash function is going to take a string and is going to output an integer. So you can take a look at how it works, but hash functions are very useful, especially for cryptography or something else we're going to see later in the security class. But for now, let's just say the hash function just takes any string and can output an integer between 0 and n, and specifically 0 and n. So now we have a way to transform our key. We're going to call this side a key. We're going to transform our key into an integer. This integer is going to be a number between 0 and n. And now there's a problem. What if we actually have two keys that gives the same hash? And that's a problem because what we actually want to do is inside this array, we actually say, well, let's say, for example, John has a number that falls right here. Let's say it's the 100th position. Why not? And at the 100th position, I have John. So I want to put, like, for example, an object, which is John, and date of birth. So 10/01/1997. But if Mary also has the same hash and it's also 100, I'm going to override John's information with Mary. So what I'm actually going to do, this array is actually going to contain a pointer to a linked list of elements. And the first linked list element is going to be John. So it's not going to be directly structured to John. It's going to be a linked list. So I'm going to have John, the key, his date of birth, then blah, 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 the value, and then a pointer to the next element. And if Mary also has hash number of 100, the next element is going to be Mary because I added her after John. So here I'm going to have Mary, date of birth, 4/6/2000, and next element, which is nothing. Now, when someone wants to have the information of what date of birth John is associated with, or Mary is associated with, let's say Mary, is going to ask like, well, hash table, I give you the key Mary, give me the date of birth. And the hash table is going to compute the hash again. It's going to give a 100 because the hash is not going to change. It's going to be 100. We're going to go inside the linked list. We're going to find the first element, which has key John, which is not Mary. So we know like, it's not going to be this one. We're going to go to the next one and the key is going to match. And so we're going to return the value. And this side is called the value. And we have an association between a key and a value. And that's the principle behind a hash map. Now the exercise is actually to code this hash map in the C programming language.